as whether or not there was anyone left of the house of Saul that I may show the kindness of God to. I'm not concerned about his shortcomings or how he's living. I don't need to know about his present predicament or his past problems. I want to know, is there anyone left of the house of Saul that I can show the kindness of God to? See, there is a difference between kindness and God's kind of kindness. See, when you decide to be kind to people, you do it because it's a part of your nature. But when you show God's kindness to people, you do it because you're trying to pass along what God has done for you. Yeah. See, you're being kind because God has been kind to you. You're being gracious because God has been gracious to you. I wish I had time to stay there for just a little while, but let me say it to you this way. If God has forgiven you, you ought to be kind enough to forgive somebody else. If God has been a blessing to you, you ought to be a blessing to somebody else. If God has given you another chance, you ought to be kind enough to give somebody else another chance. If God has given you a break, you ought to be kind enough to give somebody else a break. So David is saying, I want to show whoever it is that's left not only kindness, but God's kind of kindness. For when we look at David's response, it reminds us that we have an obligation not to forget where God has brought us from. Because whether you know it or not, we all have been blessed to be a blessing to other people. All of us have a past. And like Mephibosheth, we all have a fallen nature about us. All of us have some disappointments and setbacks in our lives that has caused us to fall along the way. For the Bible says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So even on your best day, you still fall short. People have to be so careful about their attitude and the way they treat other people, especially those who call themselves Christians. And I say that because I've discovered that there's something about being blessed and satisfied that causes us to get temporary amnesia. See, because some people, after they've experienced the favor of God and he delivers them out of their storm, they have the tendency to forget about those that are less fortunate than themselves. They become so high and holy that they're no earthly good. But I come to serve notice on you. See, people hear what you say, but they see how you live. See, the church is a hospital for sick people. But the sad reality is that too many people come here to church Sunday after Sunday to hear a word of hope, help, and encouragement. But they leave here feeling bitter instead of better because they encounter some folks who called themselves Christians. And yet somehow, after they experience the favor and kindness of God in their lives, they have the audacity to look down their nose and point fingers at other people as if they forgot how helpless and hopeless their lives were before God delivered them out of their mess. Oh, I know I'm right about it. But if the truth be told, not too long ago, in the not so distant past, their life was so jacked up and messed up and tore up from the flow up that if it had not been for the Lord who was on their side, they shouldn't have made it. They couldn't have made it, and they wouldn't have made it. Look at your neighbor and tell him, but God stepped in right in the middle of your mess and moved on your behalf. God stepped in and worked it out for you. See, God did not cause you because you were so upright, righteous, and holy. But God, he looked beyond your faults and he still supplied your needs. See, God called you not because of where you were, but because of where he wanted to take you. Not because of your dark past, but because of your promising future. And I'm so glad that God does not do us like other people. God will not only meet you where you are, he won't leave you where he found you. And if we're ever going to be the church that God has called us to be, we have to show the love of God and the kindness of God to other people. Kindness, kindness, kindness is one of the greatest attributes of the human character. And a spirit of kindness is one of the greatest needs that we have in this world that we live in. Well, I believe that if a spirit of kindness permeated the hearts and minds of the people, the world would be a far different and a far better place. Just imagine what it would be like if a spirit of kindness had dominion in our hearts, dominion in our homes, in our communities, dominion in our country and throughout the world. If every person was caring, compassionate, and kind to each other, there would be no more worry and war, no more anger and hostility, no more hatred and selfishness, no more backbiting and bitterness, no more violence and murders, no more lying and loneliness, no more deception and doubt. A spirit of kindness would create a different atmosphere and a different world. Yes, a spirit of kindness is a kindness that loves your neighbor as yourself. Spirit of kindness remembers how good God has been and reaches out to serve and to help others when they are in need. But not only do we have an obligation not to forget where God has brought us from, we need to be willing to go find others less fortunate than ourselves to show the kindness of God to. Are you listening to me? I think I need to take the time to tell you this morning that some of the trouble and the trials that we face is not always the result of sin in our lives. See, like Mephibosheth, some of us have had to handle some hardships placed on us at the hands of other people. Chapter 4, the record is when Mephibosheth was just 5 years old, when the news came about Saul and Jonathan being killed in battle, his nurse picked him up and fled in fear, but as she hurried to leave, the record is she dropped him and he became crippled. See, Mephibosheth is representative of so many of us, and that's why we have to be careful about the way we look at others who have fallen on hard times. We have to be careful not to look at people as if it's their fault or assume they're lazy and they deserve to be where they are. Mephibosheth is a person of so much promise and so much possibility, but how can he lay claim to his potential when he keeps getting passed up and passed over because of his position? May I remind you that Mephibosheth is not in the shape he's in because he was born that way. He ended up like that because the one who was responsible to care for him dropped him along the way. Stay with me, because I need you to understand that there are so many people in our communities that are crippled not because of any fault or failure on their own, but they're crippled because somebody else dropped them. But regardless of their condition, they're still people who God loves. And I don't know who I'm here for, but I come to encourage you that just because someone in your past that was responsible for you dropped you, God can still use you. Don't worry about your doubters. Don't worry about the folk that discounted you and disregarded you.